Ladies and gentlemen, we meet again towards Parashat Reeh for a short and sweet idea, which I think is very central about our identity, and that is the following. We are told in this week's Parasha that the Jewish people are the chosen people. Again, this is something which people nowadays immediately relate to racism and in a negative way. And it is not negative at all, because racism is defined as superiority that gives you permission to tread and to put down others. We're not putting down anybody. We're not doing anything bad to anybody. On the contrary, we claim we're the chosen people, therefore we have more obligations. It's not that we have more rights, we have more obligations. We have an obligation to bring ourselves to a certain level that we can be light unto the nations. We have obligations to society. It's not that we are taking upon ourselves certain things that we permission. As the Besser mentioned, the Ari Germans made certain people not legitimate. And tread on whole societies. We're not in that direction at all of racism. We are Am Kodosh. We are a holy nation, and we're a chosen nation. In what context are we told, though, that we are the chosen people? I'd like to look into the parasha for a moment, in 2 psukim, and try and understand in what context this was said. Banim atem lashem elokechem. We are the children of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Lo titgodedu v'lo tasimu kolcha ben enechem lamet. From this great height, emotional height, that wow, we are the children of Hashem, it goes to something so practical and so low. What does it say here? It says we are not allowed to do extreme things under the impression of death and mourning. When we get sad, we're not allowed to mutilate our bodies like the pagan priests used to do. They used to take some kind of knife and cut their arms and legs until they were bleeding. And that was a part of their agonizing to show in what pain they are, that they're even putting upon themselves physical pain. And this is something we're not allowed to do. We're not allowed to mutilate our bodies, and we're not allowed to pull out our hair out of anguish. We are not allowed to do that. Why? Says the following pasuk, Ki am kadosh ata Hashem Elokech, because we are a holy nation. Uvecha bachar Hashem liot lo le'am sgula mikol ha'amim asher al pnei adamah, because you were chosen people. So what has it got to do with anything? What is happening? What is the sequence of events here in the Parsha? We are children of Hashem. We must not mutilate our bodies. And we are the chosen people. What is happening? So what I'd like to share with you is the following thought, that actually this Parsha that we spoke about last year, when I was talking about redefining happiness, we talked about 7 different levels of happiness. And this parasha that actually is telling us how high we can get emotionally if we actually invest in it, the happiness we can get out of loving, the happiness we can get out of giving, the happiness we can get out of going to Israel and going to Yerushalayim, and there's certain different happinesses that we can actually achieve. And taking care of all the different people who are less fortunate than us, it gives us happiness. We can get to a certain level of happiness. And now we're talking about the other side of it. How low can we get? How low? And the Torah is telling us you can't get so low that you start mutilating yourself. We cannot be so sorry. Why can we not be so sorry? Because we are the sons and daughters, we are the children of Hashem. So actually, Rashi in the beginning says that we have to differentiate ourselves from the pagans, and therefore we may not mutilate ourselves. But furthermore than that, he said, look, our body is not ours. We got our body from Hashem, and we have to take care of this body. This body has to be in best shape as possible, has to be beautiful, has to be preserved. We cannot mutilate our own bodies. We have no permission to mutilate our own bodies. However, it's interesting to see that the Da'at Kainim brings a deeper understanding to this, and says we must not get so sad. Even when we're mourning for our parents, we must not get so sad. Why? Because we always have a Father in heaven. We will never be orphans. We are children of Hashem. We will never be orphans. And that is a profound understanding that is a reason not to be too sad. The Ibn Ezra takes this into a different direction and says, we are just children of Hashem. And, as children, sometimes we don't fully understand our parents' actions. And therefore, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides that this person is going to pass away, or that person is going to die, or even young people die in accidents, whatever it might be, illnesses, he has his reckoning. He's like our parents. Sometimes we do not fully understand our parents' actions till many, many years later. I remember as a child, I was about 7 or 8 years old, and my parents forced me to go to a dentist and to get all kinds of things done in my mouth. And at the time, I'm talking about many years ago, it was terribly painful, and it was a terrible. And I did not understand why my parents are making me go through this terrible anguish and pain. And it was the only time in my life that I didn't speak to my parents for 2 weeks. As a child, I just couldn't handle it. They forced me to go through such a painful thing. And I'm telling you now, as an adult, they saved my teeth, and they made me go through some kind of procedure that throughout my life I've hardly had any difficulty with my teeth, because thanks to that time. But at the time I didn't understand it. At the time I was in pain. At the time I didn't speak to them for 2 weeks. But that is it. We are children of Hashem, and therefore Hashem takes us through all kinds of things we might not fully understand, but we have to remember that He is our Father in heaven, and therefore we have to accept the things He takes us through. The Rabbeinu Bechai says, furthermore, he says, you know what? We have an inheritance because Hashem is our Father in heaven, so that His inheritance to us is, and since He is eternal, so our inheritance is eternal, and therefore we shouldn't be so sad, because we have an eternal reward. That means after death, there is still reward to come in the world to come. And that is expressed further by the Kli Yakar. And I think the Ramban takes this furthest and says, this is proof that we have a world to come. This is proof that at the end of life, of our physical life, we still have a spiritual life, where we get reward for all the mitzvot we do. So actually, when we're mourning over somebody who's deceased, we're actually mourning over ourselves, because the person himself who passed away is in a better place and is now getting reward for all the mitzvot he or she did. And therefore, we're mourning about ourselves. So our mourning about ourselves should be limited, because actually our Father in heaven is there, and He's thinking like a parent, and He's looking at the bigger picture. And therefore, even if we're going to a dentist and we're going through terrible pain just now, the bigger picture is for many, many years you won't have problems with your teeth. And therefore, when we're talking about this parasha that talks about happiness and how high we should get happiness, it's talking also about our lowest point. Our lowest point shouldn't be so low, because we are children of Hashem, because we have Hashem in heaven who promises us eternal reward, and therefore our high should be very high, as we spoke about last year, but our low shouldn't be so low. We shouldn't get too low. We shouldn't get to such a depth that we start mutilating ourselves. We shouldn't go mad. We should understand that even when somebody passes away, there is a master plan upstairs. We don't fully understand it, but we accept it as part of our emunah, and therefore if our height is so high, as we spoke about, and our low isn't so low, so our average is Baruch Hashem doing very well. Wishing you all Shabbat Shalom.